One more thing that comes to mind too, though, I think you also sometimes have to give people grace and flip that. And I'll give you a scenario for that. If I pass you in the hallway, I'm going to say good morning to you or hello to you or something. That is my nature. I think that is polite. I'm not asking you to get married. I'm saying hello. That's it. So we can speak to each other, you know?
Mhm.
And I passed someone who was obviously leaving her shift one day and said hello, and she didn't speak back, and it just hit me the wrong way. It flew all over me. And this is someone that worked under my leadership, so there are expectations, you know. And I turned around, and my first initial reaction was anger. And I flipped around, and then for some reason, as I got close to her, the words that came out of my mouth were, "Are you okay?"
Mm.
And she said no.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the TEMSEA Leadership Podcast. My name's Eric Claus, and once again, I am honored to be able to be your host. Before we jump into this episode, I wanted to remind everybody about our conference that is coming up. It's the TEMSEA Conference. It's a yearly conference held in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, scheduled for July 24th, 25th, and 26th. Also, that week, this is the second time this is happening, a golf outing, which is scheduled to be on July 23rd. This whole week is going to be power packed. We hope that you can join at least some of the activities, incredible networking and education. So please join us. Check the show notes out for that information. Also, a reminder about our monthly coaching call hosted by Phil Sanderson. Many of you know Phil. Phil is an incredible leader and teaches leadership all across the state. These calls are scheduled for the first Friday of every month. Check the information out in the show notes. Now on to the podcast. I am so excited to be able to share this interview with you with Dr. Susan Hernandez, a mentor of mine for many years. You are going to be blown away by the information that she shares. So welcome, and I know this conversation is going to add value to you. Dr. Susan Hernandez, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so excited and have been looking forward to having this conversation with you since we started the podcast. Lee and I talked about this. Your name came to the top of the list. So, so excited.
Thank you. I'm honored, actually.
Well, I wanted to share with everybody where you are right now and what you do, and then we'll kind of fill in some of the details on how we met. Is right now, currently, you are in Dallas, Texas. You are the Associate Vice President and Health Systems Chief Nursing Executive for University of Texas Southwestern University Hospitals in Dallas. And that is just amazing. I've had an opportunity a few years ago to come down there and present to your team and got to see it. And it was just an unbelievable, system on how large it is. But just to put this in perspective about your role is, as when I was reading this in your CV, is that I laugh when I say this because I can't even wrap my head around it. You were responsible for nursing practice throughout the university hospitals and ambulatory clinics with over 5,000 FTEs that report to you in your system, and you manage a budget of over $500 million. I'm going to say that again, $500 million.
Who knew?
Right. So, Susan, it's crazy as we're sitting here talking, and I would feel so intimidated talking to you if I wouldn't have had the experience that started this. And I wanted to share with everybody to level set. So I'm holding up in front of me a journal. And my wife and my kids gave this to me in September of 2013. And I found myself in a position. I'm in a nursing leadership master's program. And I'm about to finish up. I finished up in December. And I had an opportunity to pick someone to do my clinical with my last semester. I'm wrapping it all up. And Susan, I don't know if I ever told you this. I'll never forget this. So I'm talking to some leaders at the hospital that you and I were working at. And I said, hey, I'm interested in doing a clinical with Susan. And this is what I was told. You don't need to do that. They said she is in such an executive position. You need to be with a director. You don't need to be at that level. And I said, I'm not interested because this is my only opportunity to be able to be with someone and to see what happens in that frame of mind. And let me tell you this, because this is not about me, this is about you. What I learned from you, and I documented it in my journal every day that I was with you, has impacted me substantially now that I'm in a director's role. The things, and I have even shared this in my lectures and teaching some of the things. So I wanted to give everybody a background about how we met and the opportunity that you gave me. I am forever grateful. So this is a pleasure for me.
Well, thank you. I really am excited. Of course, I have high respect for you and for the work that you do. So that makes it really easy for us to get to have this conversation. And, when you shared what I do, I never think of it like that. It is a bit overwhelming when you say numbers. I just don't think of it like that.
Susan, let's jump in. I don't know how another question to ask, but like, how did you get to where you are? Like, if I know you probably don't reflect on it and think about it because you're like overwhelmed, maybe not. But when you look back, how did your career progress? Like, how did it start for you?
I think bottom line is you just put one foot in front of the other and you keep going. I am not a goals oriented. I want to do this in 3 years and this in 5 years and this in 10 years. That's not who I am as a human. That can be disappointing to some, but it's just not who I am. But what I have always been is someone who's willing to do the work. I really care about people and I like people and I want us all to be successful. And I think that paid off for me. I opened my mind to opportunities. I will tell you earlier in my career, people would say, do you want to be on this committee or that committee? And I said, yes. And I think that helps you, see different perspectives in healthcare. It helps you build relationships you wouldn't have normally built. And it opens doors in the long run if you're willing to do the work.
Yeah. One of the things that I really wanted to share with the audience and the people that listen to this, and we have a national audience now, but someone in your position, which most people don't have a chance to have a conversation with because they see you, right? They see your name. And I even witnessed this when I was with you. When you walked into the room, people feel differently and they act differently when someone of an executive team. But I wanted to go back and I wanted to read everybody, how you progressed in your career. You went to the same college that I did to get nursing, and you started out as an associate's degree nurse. You got your bachelor's degree, you got your MBA, and then you got your doctorate in nursing practice. But your position, it didn't start in a leadership position. You started as a care partner.
I did.
And you went through, and I'll read this and then you can elaborate. So care partner, you were a registered nurse, you were a charge nurse, assistant manager, then manager, and then you started getting into the executive ranks. And I think where one of the things that I've been fascinated with in leadership is that I think people forget that they have to start somewhere and in the very beginning, and they have to do that right. But what did some of that look like for you during your ranks? Did you ever think you'd get to where you are? What are some key things that you learned from taking it step by step and not getting it all handed to you at one time?
So first of all, no, I never thought I'd be in a role like this when I became a nurse. I actually wanted to be a flight nurse, and that would have been a terrible position for me since I have motion sickness. No one needs to put me on a helicopter trying to help people, but there you go. And I think for me, when I was a staff nurse, I was really fortunate to start as a care partner and then stay on as a nurse. So some of that transition was a little bit easier for me because I knew the people, I knew the place, I knew some of the documentation, some of those things. So that helps. In terms of going to the next level, which was the charge nurse, I found it interesting. I just
Mhm.
found the work fascinating when I watched to see what the charge nurse was doing. And so I wanted to do it. And I remember, now this was intentional. I would get my initial assessments done, and then I would check with my buddies, of course, to see if they were ready for coffee or needed to have some help. And then I would sort of hang in the area nearest to my patients, but also to the charge nurse so that I could see what was going on. And that really showed me that if you just show interest, people will invest in you.
Mm.
And so I was showing some interest. And so then when there was a charge nurse position available, those charge nurses took my name to the manager,
Wow.
and maybe we should consider Susan. And so that's a big piece of it, I think. And that can happen throughout your entire career.
Yeah. The same thing happened to me with my role when we met. I'm there for a short period of time and they're like, hey, you want to be a charge? I was like, I don't even know where the equipment is. So I do I do think that you're right, is that you're showing interest, you're taking an initiative, and you're learning from the people that are mentoring you along the way. And it's great not to forget about that part of the journey, because it's important, because it's foundational when you get to your position, because you can connect with everybody because you've risen through the ranks. And the one thing I wanted to ask you, so you're sitting in your position now. When you transition from the hospital that you previously worked at to your position, which was a much grander position, what was it like? Well, what position did you take when you went to Texas? And then kind of tell us what your first year looked like. Was it overwhelming? Was it more than you thought, where you're like, whoa, I'm in over my head? Walk us through that.
Okay, so first of all, I don't know about everybody else that will listen to this, but pretty much every job you should worry a little bit about being in over your head, because otherwise you might be a little too confident and you could get knocked down pretty easily. So of course it was a step for me, and it was a big step for me. So a couple of things. When I left my previous role, I was in a CNO role of a hospital, but it was a different size and a different type of hospital than I was going into. It was academic medicine, so that helps. But I went to a place that was a new city. I had never lived anywhere but Nashville, Tennessee before I came to Dallas, Texas, even for college, the whole thing. I had a husband that traveled in a new city where I had no friends and was starting a new job. And I came in the door 6 months before we were opening a brand new hospital, a big hospital. And so intimidated, absolutely. I mean, I had been in the same place for 20 years. I knew the
Mhm.
people, I knew the place, I knew the policies, I knew those things. And so it was stressful, but it's also exciting. And I think when you transition, if you just have an open mind and you listen a lot and you talk less in the beginning, it's easy to transition. It's easy to build relationships. You can figure people out. They can figure you out. But you have to come in certainly not assuming you know what to do. Have confidence. They want you to lead with
Mhm.
confidence. They hired you for a reason, and so you should come in with some confidence. But also be able to be willing to listen to what's good about the place already. The other thing I would say is do your best to not yearn for what you left behind.
Okay.
Because when you've been in the same place for 20 years, it's a whole lot easier than what you've come to.
Yeah.
And it's scary. It's scary. The good thing is, um, the person who hired me wanted me there and was going to help me be successful. And that should be the case no matter where you go.
If you were to go back and think about that first year, knowing what you know now, would you have done anything differently?
I would have. So there's a couple of things. One is more on the personal side. I lived in the city as a guest, not as someone who had truly lived there and was getting ingrained in the community. And
Okay.
I think that could positively impact your ability to do your job when you're more ingrained in your community as well. So I think I would do that differently. The other thing is I was so heavily focused on just the nursing team, partially because that's what I was hired to do, and partially because that's what I know, that I didn't spend enough time cultivating relationships with the faculty And I
Okay.
think I would have liked to have done that in a different way. I am, by nature, I sit on the line of introvert and extrovert. And
Okay.
people who work with me would have no idea that that's true. And then I'm also, I can be intimidated by all the smart people that have surrounded me throughout my career. And so I think sometimes I laid back when I should have been standing a little more tall and cultivating those relationships better.
Okay. I'm going to take it down just another like super, super low. I want to say low level, but for all the leaders that are listening to this, I'm like, wow, you know, I want to get to where Susan is. I want to get to this position. From someone from your experience, how would you coach me in someone that is taking a leadership role that I've never been there before? Let's say that I'm a medic, and then I get it. I advance to captain status or supervisor status. Someone in administration, like kind of tell me from what you've learned, what advice would you give for me, knowing what you know now and dealing with massive teams? What are some of those nuggets?
Um, Listen and do the work. And I'll talk a little bit about that. I have people on my team who wanted to come in for their interview, and we would go through the interview. I would make them an offer, and the day I made them the offer, they said, "What's the next step for me? Step for me after this?" That is a message to me that you're already looking ahead and you're not willing to think about the work you're getting into. You've got to do the work. You've got to be present in the work, knowing that it will come. It will come. The other thing is, remember that the timeline might not be exactly the way you want it. It just
Mhm.
might not be. Um, I think I would say always be learning, always be learning. And some of that means you've got to go out and find someone who's willing to tell you the truth that you can actually hear the truth from,
Okay.
and then put that into play. And that's
Yeah.
not easy. I mean, even today, I have team members that would say, probably wouldn't have done it that way.
Okay.
And we all come at it wanting to do it right. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that's hard to hear, but those are my best lessons often for
Okay.
myself, is when I hear that from others. So, and don't assume you'll never get there.
Okay.
Don't just sit back and assume, unless you really just want to do one thing your whole career, which is fine. We need people like that too. But if you have ambition to grow, don't wait for it to come to you. You've got to take the steps. You've got to do the work. You also have to tell people you want to move on so that they'll help you grow.
Okay. So you had mentioned, someone to speak truth to you. I'll use this word as mentors. So
Okay.
have you had mentors in your career? And is that something that you think that, many leaders need to have?
Absolutely. I've actually had official coaches, I've had
Okay.
mentors, and I've had sponsors. And they are all really, in my opinion, there for a little bit of a different reason.
Okay.
And so if we stick with coaches, that might be the official person that's hired from an organization to really help you to get where the organization wants you to go. And those people are incredibly valuable, incredibly valuable. They help you think in different ways. Same thing for mentors. I've had a lot of mentors throughout my
Okay.
career, and some of those were other nurses. Some of them were business people. I would say that he probably doesn't know it. He will when I tell him he needs to listen to this. But my brother mentors me, and he's 3.5 years younger than me. But there are things that he does in his business that I think, oh, wow, I should try that. I should think about that in a different way. And so now I go to him with questions in different ways. And so I've taken pieces and parts from lots of people to try to put together what I think is best in terms of the use of my skills and the way that I use whatever gifts I may have to help other people, for sure. And everyone should seek that. Everyone. I had a leader that I worked for once that I said something about mentorship and coaching, and he said, "Oh, I don't need all that now. I've been doing this too long." And I
Wow.
thought, man, that is short-sighted.
Mm,
Short-sighted, because you can always get better.
yeah. We did a podcast with Dr. Peter Antebi, who is a businessman and a physician. And he used the word superpowers, like he knows what his superpowers are. And they're very few things. And so it was pretty incredible. And we've actually taught on this concept about the strengths that we have that are unique. And I also translate that into mentorship. The people that we need to mentor, as you mentioned, your brother who's younger, but obviously he has a superpower that you can benefit from. So it doesn't have to be the older person. Like there are people that
No.
do things so well and it's in their strength. I'm mentored by my daughter, Rachel. I'm mentored by my son, Chris, of course, my wife. There's intentional relationships that I have. But that's a powerful thing that you mentioned that I don't want people to lose the significance about mentors look differently and they need to be diverse because you are needing things not just in your area.
For sure. I mean, my husband he may hear me on a meeting sometime and then give me advice after that. That's fantastic. His viewpoint is different. I have a guy on my team and we joke about it, but it's really true. I call him my prize millennial because, when he started working with me, it was when everybody wanted to use the terminology of millennial like it was a bad word. He's fantastic and he completely pushes me. And I did have to tell him what a fax machine was, but it works. You're right. The point about different places that people come from and different ages is so important. So
Yeah.
important. I even remember when I was a newer leader thinking, oh, I can't lead these nurses who have been nurses for 35 years. Yes, you can,
Mhm.
because you have a gift that they may not have, or you want to do a job they don't really want to do.
Yeah.
And so I think it's an important point.
So I'm all about personal growth. You are as well. So someone in your position, like I think leaders, this is the way I look at this, Susan, that you have to stay above your team, meaning not with, leveling. It's about growing. It's about learning. It's about adapting to new things that are happening, technologies. What are some of the habits that you have that keep you not being stagnant, but are really like pushing the envelope to get better so you can lead this massive team of 5,000 people that you have?
I had, actually, she worked for me, but I consider her a mentor as well, a person who pushed me out of my comfort zone.
Okay.
And the way she did it was by pushing me to get into professional organizations and not just show up when they have their annual meeting, but truly participate. Be willing to research or do projects on things that you might not be as skilled in, and then get out and speak about it. And so I will tell you one that, as you know, because you know me, we joke a lot on my teams because we like to. And my team is laughing now because for some reason, all of a sudden, I'm being asked to speak on nursing and technology and AI. Well, as you well know, I couldn't even get my computer to work quickly enough for us to get this going. So it is, why me? And they literally will say, why you? It's hilarious. But what you have to realize is it pushes me to learn about it.
Okay.
So the more if I'm going to have to be out there and have an intelligent conversation about something, I better go study up. And so that's one of the ways that I do it. I do read books that make me better in certain, whether it's leader development or team play or things like that. It is not my favorite thing to do. And so I have to force myself to do that. I joke that I have to, when I'm off work, I don't want to read smart books. I just want to read mindless books. But I do try to occasionally, think about that in different ways.
I think one of your, intentionalities is that you've continued to advance in your profession from, nursing to your MBA to your doctor. Like you've always had the growth mindset. You obviously have the credentials, but that is all part of the package of, some in the form of, don't get that degree and that's okay, but they're continuing to learn. They're continuing to grow. They're learning from their team members. They're implementing those type of things. And it's all part of this industry is changing so fast.
Is.
And you can't keep up with it, but you can be around smart people to help, really kind of make you better. And I wanted to ask you this, and this is really kind of getting into how someone likes you thinks is that let's say that you were looking for a member of your executive team. What are some of those qualities that you look up, and I know you have intuition. Like you can walk into the room and be like, that person's trouble. I've seen you do it. Or you're like, you got to watch out. You can't trust. But I say that and not as in a joke, but it kind of is that you have a sense of reading people, but how would you look for qualities in that leader that you need on your executive team? What do they look like? If you're going to hire me and you're like, Eric, I want you on my executive team, this is why it would be.
I definitely want someone who, has progression and that they've had some motivation to do some things. So I would look at how they are, how well-rounded they are, just in terms of what they've experienced. You're right. I do have a little gut instinct sometimes. Humility is a big deal for me. I want
Okay.
people to be able to say what works and what doesn't work and be okay with that and be confident enough that they should say that. They can say things like that. That's incredibly important to me. People who say I, and never talk about the team, they can't work for me. It's just not going to work. They'd be miserable. I'd be miserable. It just doesn't work. So I would look for things like that. I want people to be able to be transparent. And in these roles at this level, there are some limitations to that. There are. But I still believe there are ways that you can say things to give people information without breaching any confidence that you're not supposed to breach and things like that. I want somebody that is passionate about their work. I can teach you the tasks at this point. We can work on those kinds of things, but I want you to care about the work and have a positive attitude about the work. It doesn't mean that every second of every day you're going to be happy. That is unrealistic. But I want you to have some passion for the work too. And I think that comes out when you talk to people. If you spend a few minutes with them, you can tell. You can absolutely tell.
Yeah, you definitely can tell. And the longer that I'm in, the director's role, everything that you mentioned, you sometimes you just have a sense of feeling about things. You feel it. You're like, wow, this does not feel good. I don't know why. It's that, intuition thing. Let's even go down to the employee. When you look at someone or you hear about someone that had to be coached from some of your administrative team, what do you think some qualities that truly destroy a individual's potential on advancing in the organization?
I can visualize three people right now. I'll just go ahead and admit that.
Okay.
And I'll try to describe some of the failure points. So there's one that I've worked with that she is desperate to grow. She has been out there in professional organizations. She wants to be in the front, but I guess it's emotional intelligence on some level, quite frankly, ability to read the room and read the audience and know when you sit back and when you step up. She doesn't have it and she can't
Okay.
hear it. And so she enters the room very dramatically. She bosses people around as quickly as she can. She tries to make jokes about it, but they're not funny because it's not assertive, it's aggressive, and she can't hear that feedback. She will never be anything than what she is today in this organization. It just isn't going to happen. And it's too bad because she's incredibly smart. So that's one. Another one is that I had somebody that couldn't keep things confidential because he needed to be the big man on campus and be the first one with the information. And at some point, trying to be the one that's always in the know, it will bite you. It will bite you, and you won't be able to continue on in your leadership. A third one, and this is someone I've worked with not so so far in the distant past. She it really is about how you portray yourself, I think I would say, even to the moment you enter the room or when you're walking across a campus or whatever it is. I think it's that piece of it because she's excellent at tasks and she gets them done really quickly, but she doesn't think of the impacts of how she gets them done. And so then that's going to put a lid on her if she doesn't think about, oh, wait, I need to slow down. And if the task takes me a week instead of a day, but it gets done the right way and it doesn't have negative downstream impact, then it comes out better for everybody involved.
That's so good. I wish I would have wrote those things down, but those are key. I mean, they really are. I'm going to go back and I think that is worth repeating to everyone and will be something that we add in some of our curriculum that we're teaching throughout the state. But those are incredible factors. And that's part of the package. Like those are no-go
Yes,
things that are detrimental to an organization or service.
for sure. And you have to remember in your leadership role, and it doesn't matter which one you're in, you have to be able to lead up, down, and side to side.
Hmm.
And it's different for all of those in terms of where people are in their roles, but it's also different in terms of timing and what the topic is.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that I wanted to mention to you, and I'm aware of it, and from being mentored by people like you, is one of the things that I noticed is that how people of influential positions, even at paramedic level, nursing level, not in the administrative part, but how they treat individuals like that are not licensed, like the environmental services. Like, do they show respect to those people, those team members that may not have the opportunity to go to school? And I will do that. And sometimes it's uncomfortable for me because I do it and I like pay attention. It's like, wow, that's somebody that you can trust that doesn't use their influence to manipulate team members. And that is a trait that I have. Has that impacted you as well about how you feel that they treat their individuals and their team members?
For sure. Two examples of that. One was a very long time ago when I was a manager, and I heard a nursing student say, "I'm not going to go help you clean that patient up. I'll never do that when I graduate." And some have seen this from me before. I reeled around and I went over and I said, "Hey, I'm Susan. I'd like to meet you." And then what ensued was a little conversation about how she probably wouldn't work with me ever again. But it was awful. And I thought, oh, how did you even get this far in your career? We don't
Mhm.
need people like you in healthcare. So
Yeah.
that is one. Another one was I was actually searching for a CNO, and I was in the final stages of the interview process. And so I took one of the candidates on rounds through the unit with me. And she ignored certain people, which was obvious. And so I thought, well, maybe she's nervous and she doesn't notice or whatever. And then when we got to a nurse's station, we were gathering and we were chatting, she interrupted me and talked over me. And I thought, if you will do that in your interview and you will do it to me, you're going to do it to everyone and you can't be on my team. It was so
Wow.
obvious. I
So
know.
that was immediately it's a no-go,
I was done.
regardless of, yeah, I love
Yep.
that. That is
Rounds
that's
are
a
over. Interview is
yeah,
over.
that's a huge value. And I'm so glad that you're saying that because sometimes we want it more for the people and we overlook those things and they will come back like a wildfire and absolutely be destructive for building a team and a culture. And wow, that is such a powerful, powerful thing.
One more thing that comes to mind too, though, I think you also sometimes have to give people grace and flip that. And I'll give you a scenario for that. If I pass you in the hallway, I'm going to say good morning to you or hello to you or something. That
Mhm.
is my nature. I think that is polite. I'm not asking you to get married. I'm saying hello. That's it. So we can speak to each other.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I passed someone who was obviously leaving her shift one day and said hello, and she didn't speak back, and it just hit me the wrong way. It flew all over me. And this is someone that worked under my leadership, so there are expectations. And I turned around, and my first initial reaction was anger. And I flipped around, and then for some reason, as I got close to her, the words that came out of my mouth were, "Are you okay?"
Mm.
And she said no.
Oh.
And she proceeded to tell me it was a death in women's health, which doesn't happen very often. She describes the evening. She was actually waiting for her mother to pick her up because she didn't feel like she could drive home. And it was such a lesson for me, too, that sometimes people don't treat you the way that you think they should for reasons that you just don't know about. And so I try not to be super quick to react, which is hard. It's really hard to do because if I had judged that person on that one incident, I wouldn't have wanted her on my team. And yet I wasn't allowing her to be human.
Mm.
She's human. So you have to balance those. feelings, emotions, and then
Yeah.
also what you witness in terms of your leadership.
I love that question. I do. And I think that everybody listening to this can appreciate that we see the worst in people sometimes. And it's a stressful, it's a stressful business. Like we're dealing with things, we see things, and we want to assume and we want to be defensive. But I love that as a approach that is very calm to say, are you okay? That, and it immediately, I'm assuming, you tell me if I'm wrong, it completely made her defenses go down, and to answer you as in, I need help, is basically what she was saying.
Absolutely. And I don't know what changed. Well, I do think I know what changed it in that moment, but I'm thankful that it changed me because I was angry. I was.
Yes, yes. And let's take this personally too, Susan, into a personal level, and work and outside life balance. I think sometimes those closest to us, we can do that. And we're like, well, why did you treat me that way? Versus saying, are you okay? I'm gonna do that. That's a powerful thing. So
True.
thanks for that tip. Wow. Um, I'm going to change gears with you a minute, and
Okay.
you're probably not going to remember this, but this is in my view of how this happened. This is great, by the way, is the days that I was with you, I remember there were days in meetings, and I was with you for blocks of time, 2, 3 hours. And I remember there were some days, Susan, that I never got to ask you a question because you were literally from one meeting to the next, and you were giving me a pre-brief of the meeting, or we were debriefing, and I was just like taking notes, and I didn't have to ask you questions because you were answering them, and I knew there would come a time and a place. I'll never forget, we walked into your office one day and you had 5 minutes before the next meeting, and you pulled your email up, and I'll never forget this. And it was a long email. And you said, I don't have time to read that. You said, I do not like when people send me long emails. And that forever changed me. But there's a part B to this. And you were being transparent with me. And you said, Eric, the one thing that I hate is when people send me an email and they don't tell me what they need. And you said, I need bullet points. And if you recall, I had reached out to you sometime later to present at one of our luncheons. And I said, Susan, this is what I need. And I bullet pointed it out. I do that to this day. But what I want to get you to talk about, because it's fascinating, that you really do work in 5-minute increments. And tell us about email. Tell us about communication and what you do with your team, and how do you teach that, and just unload on us about that. So powerful.
So it's wild, to be quite frank, in terms of all the means of communications right now. Because if you think about how we all communicate, you've got text messaging, you've got your emails, you've got and personal and work. And now, we use Teams. And so all of a sudden, all these people are communicating on Teams. And I was missing out on important communications because I don't use Teams. I use email, text messaging, and phone calls.
Mhm.
And so I think there's a couple of things that I've had to learn to do. One is I do exactly what I just described there to you, is I glance at things so I can see who it's from. I read the first couple of sentences, and then I know then if I can do it right then or if I got to go back to it. Sometimes it's because I don't have the time to fully read the whole thing. Sometimes I don't have the energy to deal with all the paragraphs that are going to be in it. That's just the way it is. It truly just depends. But the other thing I've done is I've been more intentional about telling my team what I need. And I did learn that when I worked with you and that team. I realized that if people wanted something from me, they would spend hours, weeks, days creating these huge presentations or these long paragraphs of information, and they'd sit down with me, and I would just say, what do you need? Just get to the bottom line. And that's frustrating to them because they've spent all this time putting all this information together. And so if I don't tell people up front the way I like to have information fed to me, then shame on me. So I absolutely would say executive summary is called that for a reason. People really need at that level, you just need the highlights. Give me the highlights. What's going on and what do you need from me? And then if I need more information, I will say to you, I really need some more information to dive into this. I can't make that decision just based on these little snippets. The other thing is, don't try to fast talk me. Just because I like bullet points, don't try to gloss over something that you know will be important to me in the decision making because you're afraid that I'll say no if I hear it.
Yeah.
Because I'll catch it. I will
Yeah,
catch it.
definitely.
And so you have to think about what you put in front of people, how you put in front of them, and also don't expect immediate response. We can't. We physically can't. I get frustrated when people say, we need this right now. Well, that your lack of planning is not my emergency now. I no. The answer is no. I was at a conference recently, and I had a sales rep say, "Hey, can I talk to you about so and so?" And we already do work with them. I was willing to speak to them, and I said, "I don't have time right now. I've got 15 minutes to get lunch because I'm prepping to talk in a little while." And they said, "Well, we'll just follow you through the line to get your lunch." It was so disrespectful, so disrespectful. So I would say to those listening, be thoughtful about how you do that to others, but then also make sure that you share the message of how you like to get communication and how much you need, because not everybody likes the bullet points.
Yeah.
I do.
That's powerful because you as a leader took on the responsibility to not assume that your team needs to figure it out. You coach them and you're saying, hey, this is my style. These these are things that I need from you. And so tell me in your mind, Susan, what is something that fires you up that an employee does or a team member that you're like, you have to control yourself, what is an out of bounds of an employee that you're like, unacceptable? I don't want to hear an excuse. I'm just going to confront you right now and say, don't ever do that again. What would that look like?
Constant complaining and negativity, I have no tolerance for.
I love it.
In
Okay.
general, I'm sorry, life is good in general. It is not perfect. It is not. You are not perfect. I am not perfect, and neither is anyone around us. And so every time I see you say something negative or you complain about something, I can't stand that. It just makes me not want to be around you at all. I also don't like the flip side of it. I don't want it always to be fake and flowery. That's not realistic, but I can't stand that. The other thing that's a deal killer for me, do not lie. I have a really hard time recovering from that.
Yeah.
And
it's the trust factor.
Trust factor is huge. There have been two people that if I say something about trust or telling a lie, there are two people in my career, one in when I was in Nashville and one since I've been here, that I hope I never have to work with them again because I can't stand dishonesty.
Wow.
If you accidentally say something that's not true, that's very different from an intentional lie.
So good. Wow. We need to write a book about this, Susan. This is crazy. I'm gonna start journaling
Life
again. And
lessons.
yes, I'm gonna journal this podcast. It's just crazy. Hey, so let's talk about conflict. In my notes here in my book, I had specifically wrote down, I don't know what page it is, but if I recall, you mentioned to me, do not engage in conflict in an email.
Oh no. No one
Tell me
wins
about
in
it.
that scenario for sure.
It
Well, I
happens
think
all the time, by the way.
Yeah, it's foolish. It's foolish
Okay.
because when we're in conflict, we often bring emotion that could quickly go away. But whatever you've written in that email is there forever. So you've got to be really thoughtful about that. And I think you can't sometimes if you're in conflict about something, it's not a bad thing and you're not angry, but who's going to know that depending on how you write it in your email and what that sounds like. And when you're going back and forth, you need to stop and pick up the phone. Period.
Okay. I
Just
love it.
stop and pick up the phone. It's so even now, sometimes I'll see things going on and I will reach out to a leader that I have a good trusting relationship with and say, you might want to call so-and-so instead of doing that. And they're of course copying everyone and their brother on it.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't help you get the work done. And the intention is to get good work done.
I'm so glad that you said that about picking up the phone, because that sometimes is a leader's best friend. I do that today, Susan, like that for 11 years ago with you. If I sense it going sideways and I know that my email is going to fire somebody up, it's like, hey, please help me understand the email. Like, it is such a tool that we need to exercise as leaders. It doesn't matter how your team likes to communicate.
No.
You as a leader, you need to be like, I need to know what is going on. I did it today as an example. I got a phone call, big conflict, and I immediately had an opportunity to talk to one of the senior leaders and just like help me understand. That's it. It wasn't confrontational. It was just like, I need to know because email is not going to work in this
No.
situation.
I just think it's so much faster and easier, and it can de-escalate things in a better way if you just
Yes.
hear each other's voice on the other end of the phone. And, you know, people even hesitate, oh, I didn't want to bother you because you're so busy, so I wrote an email so you could do it when you want to. Do you know how many emails I get? Good
Yeah.
grief. We could have solved this that quickly, and it wouldn't have escalated. You wouldn't be wondering if I'm upset about something, and I wouldn't be wondering if you're
Yeah.
upset about something. I'll give you an example that I've given a lot to leaders too. If I ask you a question, I just want you to hear the question, nothing in addition, just the question, sort of like, help me understand. If I say, hey, help me understand why you did XYZ, that's all I'm saying. I really do just want to understand, not help me understand why you did XYZ, you idiot. I'm not criticizing your choice, not at all. But sometimes if you just ask the question in email, it makes people defensive and makes them think they did something wrong when they actually really didn't. You really just don't know.
Yeah. Wow. Just so good. Speaking of challenges, I hate to even bring this up because it's going to be a painful part of your journey. And I happen to be part of that while I was doing my clinicals with you. It was during the healthcare crisis back in 13. And I'll never forget some of the days that I came to meet you and people were walking into the office, the executive suite, that were losing their jobs. And there was so much emotion that I felt. And you were so calm during that time, but I knew it was tough for you and for the CEO. And it was a terrible time. But I want to talk to you about, how do you deal with problems? Like, is there a strategy that you do? Communication, like I would just love to hear that. That was an extreme example, but how did you get through that and what can we learn from that?
Um, I I remember it vividly, vividly. I tried to think through the process that we went through to get where we were, and I felt confident that we did the best we could in the situation we were in. So I had to be okay with that. I didn't think we were doing anything ethically or morally wrong, even though it was painful, and I knew we were changing people's lives in a way that was going to be awful. And so for me, I trusted the process. I felt like the leadership team had done the right things to just try to figure out who and why and how. Um, I realized it wasn't about me. And I had to flip my thinking to, you have sort of the honor, the privilege to be able to handle this in a better way than maybe some would in terms of just the conversation. And so try to use your strengths and your skills to try to help that person get there. So that was one of the things that I did. And then I had a great team. I had a great team. And we literally said, all right, before X day, if something was going to happen on this one day, I said, let's go meet in the chapel. If you don't pray, you don't have to pray. We're not doing that. But let's just bind together, make sure everybody's okay. And then we just got to go for it. And we've just got to do the very best we can with the situation we're in. And I felt like that helped because I didn't feel like I was alone on an island. I felt like we were really in it together, even though it was not fun and we didn't want to do it, but we had to do it. And so that was helpful. And then at the end, my husband can probably recount this vividly as well. When we had done the last conversation and I came home that day, I sat down in the chair and sobbed. And I just was like, oh, I've got to get this out because every day I was just going through the motions of what I was supposed to do, which happens in leadership a lot. But at some point, you just have to release it. It was terrible. And to act like it wasn't, would be foolish. Fortunately, going through that helped me get through another difficult time when I came here, where we lost 2 nurses on my watch to addiction.
Oh,
Yes, on my watch, on my campus.
oh my goodness.
And so you talk about leading through difficult things. That scenario that we had that was really financial in nature helped prepare me for what came later that I thought I would never have to face in my career as a leader. And so I was on some level thankful for that experience that I could pull from, just in terms of make sure you talk to people, make sure you're honest and transparent in ways that you can be, make sure people know that you care. That's huge. And then go find your chair and have your release.
Mm. Is being in your position harder than you thought it would be?
Some days it is, and some days it's not. That was,
Yeah.
because there are things that pop up. You think about the nurse who was, recently prosecuted in Nashville. You think about having to
Right.
lead through that. You think about leading through this. You think about my colleagues down the street that had 2 employees shot on their
Right.
campus. I mean, those days are harder than you expect.
Yeah.
But most days are not. And
Yeah.
so that's what allows you to keep doing and to, keep re-energizing yourself to go back. Most
Yeah.
days are, you know what you're doing and you know where you are. Not in the very beginning, but you got people to help you in the very beginning.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I cannot believe that our time is almost up. And what a transition when you talked about how hard it is some days and some days not. What does it look like for you for work-life balance? And, what are some of the things that you really like to do that most people wouldn't know? Like Susan's a real person. Like when you're off and you're getting to spend time with your husband, what does that look like when work is not involved? How do you refresh yourself?
So I love the outdoors and I love the water. So
Okay.
I'm gonna travel to water if I can. So I love that. We have a dog, which, even though I live in a high-rise building, that's a little complicated. I do love having a dog. I think it helps you get through
Mhm.
stressful times when you can have a dog that doesn't talk back to you to love
Yep.
on too, not just your
Yep.
spouse, or if you have children, your children. Um, I am adamant now about a few minutes of quiet time every morning before I go to work,
Okay.
and about exercise. And I
Mm.
don't, years ago, I exercised because I wanted to be skinny. I don't do that anymore. I exercise because I want to be strong and I want to have my sanity. And I say
Mm.
that truly. And I had to find something that I like to do. I go to
Okay.
Orange Theory, if anyone knows what that is, and just hit my 5-year mark 2 days ago. And I've never done anything that consistently, ever. But I realized that I liked it and it fueled me to get to do that. And it gave me a chance to just focus on myself and not everybody else or everything else. And so that's what I do. And like I said earlier, sometimes when I'm sitting by the water, I read mindless novels.
Yes, God. Well, it's so important because I bet you there's many people that don't know that you're a real person. And I think, and I say that, right? They see you in this
True.
executive role. And, that's one of the reasons why we do this podcast, Susan, is to let people know that the people that we connect with are normal and they're human and they have feelings and they struggle and it's just all part of the package. And you added so much value to us today. And I'm so grateful. And the last question that I'll ask you, is there anything or any words of inspiration for our EMS and hospital healthcare community that you would just love to share, about, the difference that they make or whatever as we close?
I would just say thanks for staying in the business. I mean, I think we've seen so many people step away. So I am so grateful that so many people are willing to stand and stay in healthcare. I would say that. I would say make sure you write your own narrative about your profession and our profession, and do that in a really good way. And I mean, yes, there's some funny things on TikTok. I laugh at it too, but I don't want people on the outside of healthcare to think it's all bad, because it's not all bad. And then the last thing I would say is never forget the value of simple human kindness. It
Mhm.
costs you nothing. You don't even have to be that smart to do it. Just be kind. it goes a really, really, really long way. And then I would say if you're an EMS person, and I know in my world we're doing this, and I think in lots of places people are doing this, happy EMS week. I think people are celebrating. And so with that, I would just say celebrate your profession and what you do when you have the opportunity to celebrate it with your colleagues, because it's a lot of fun and it's valuable time.
Wow. Well, Susan, you're a rock star. You have made such an impact for me and many people that I'm around. And I know this podcast is going to be incredible and shared. So thank you on behalf of TEMSEA and me and Lee as your friends. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. I've loved it.
We are so thankful that you joined us here today on the TEMSEA Leadership Podcast. I hope this message inspired you like it did all of us. I wanted to express our appreciation to every single one of you hearing these words. We value you and we appreciate everything that you do for our communities. You make the world a better place by what it is that you do. Remember, the most important person that you were ever going to lead is you. We are grateful that you joined us, and we look forward to seeing you again very soon.